The story of Marcellus Williams is deeply connected to the murder of Felicia Gale, a crime that shook the city of University City, Missouri, in the late 1990s. On August 11, 1998, Felicia Gale, a 42-year-old former reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, was brutally stabbed to death in her own home. At the time of her death, she had retired from journalism and was doing volunteer work, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Her murder was shocking not only because of its brutal nature. She was stabbed 43 times, but also because it seemed random. There was no clear motive or sign of a struggle at the scene. The police began their investigation immediately, combing through the neighborhood for leads. For a while, the case went cold as investigators struggled to identify a suspect. However, 2 years later, in 2000, the police arrested Marcellus Williams for the murder. Williams, a man with a history of drug use and burglary, became the prime suspect based on evidence that began to mount against him. His arrest came after a tip from a confidential informant who claimed Williams had confessed to the crime. According to the prosecution's case, Williams had broken into Felicia Gale's home with the intention of robbing her, and when he was confronted, he attacked her in a fit of rage. The state's case was largely built on the testimony of two key witnesses, one being a former girlfriend of Williams who claimed that he had admitted to her that he committed the murder. Additionally, another man who had been incarcerated with Williams testified that Williams had confessed to him as well. The prosecution also presented evidence that items stolen from Gale's home were found in Williams' possession. At trial, Williams pleaded not guilty and maintained his innocence. His defense team argued that there was no physical evidence directly linking him to the murder, and they raised questions about the credibility of the state's witnesses. The defense claimed that the informants had been motivated by financial rewards and leniency in their own legal troubles. Despite these arguments, in 2001, Williams was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. The jury believed the prosecution's case, and his fate seemed sealed. Over the years, Williams remained on death row, but his case attracted attention from activists and legal experts who questioned the integrity of the conviction. One of the main issues raised was the absence of DNA evidence linking Williams to the crime. In fact, DNA testing performed on the knife used to murder Felicia Gale did not match Williams' DNA. This led to a growing outcry from those who believe he may have been wrongfully convicted. In 2015, further DNA testing on hair samples and other evidence once again showed no match to Williams. His legal team argued that these new findings warranted a new trial or a complete exoneration. Despite these revelations, the state of Missouri set an execution date for Williams in 2017. The execution was scheduled for August 22, 2017, but just hours before it was to take place, Missouri Governor Eric Greitens issued a stay of execution. Greitens cited the DNA evidence as the reason for the stay, stating that it raised significant questions about Williams' guilt. He appointed a board to review the evidence and make a recommendation on whether Williams should be granted clemency or face another legal proceeding. The board's review process brought renewed attention to the case. While the DNA evidence seemed to suggest that Williams may not have been the killer, some law enforcement officials maintained that the other evidence, such as the witness testimony, was still strong enough to uphold the conviction. The case put a spotlight on larger issues within the justice system, including the reliability of witness testimony, the use of informants in criminal cases, and the role of DNA evidence in modern convictions. As of the latest developments, Williams' execution remains on hold, and his case is still under review. It is unclear whether the new evidence will lead to a new trial or a full exoneration. What is certain, however, is that the murder of Felicia Gale continues to raise important questions about justice, guilt, and the application of the death penalty. As the case of Marcellus Williams continues to unfold, it remains mired in legal and moral complexities. The stay of execution issued by Governor Greitens in 2017 offered a temporary reprieve, but it also set off a new series of legal battles. The specially appointed board was tasked with reviewing all available evidence, not only to assess Williams' guilt or innocence, but also to consider the overall fairness of the trial process. Many hoped that the board's findings would provide some clarity in a case that had become a lightning rod for debates on wrongful convictions and the death penalty. In the years following the stay, advocates for Williams, including legal scholars, activists, and organizations like the Innocence Project, continued to push for new forensic analysis and a deeper investigation into the witnesses who had testified against him. They argued that the DNA evidence, which excluded Williams as the source of the DNA on the murder weapon, was strong enough to cast reasonable doubt on his conviction. They also highlighted the fact that no physical evidence ever tied him directly to the crime scene. No fingerprints, no hair samples, nothing that conclusively linked him to the murder of Felicia Gale. Despite this, prosecutors and law enforcement officials remained steadfast in their belief that Williams was the murderer. They emphasized the testimony of the two key witnesses, his former girlfriend and a jailhouse informant, arguing that these accounts were compelling enough to convict him. However, as time passed, the credibility of these witnesses came under increased scrutiny. Critics pointed out that both individuals had potential motives to lie, such as receiving reduced sentences or financial incentives for their cooperation with the authorities. These concerns added another layer of doubt to the already murky case. Meanwhile, Williams continued to assert his innocence from his prison cell. His legal team filed multiple appeals, arguing that the conviction was not only flawed but unjust, given the advancements in DNA technology that could help exonerate him. They called for further testing on additional pieces of evidence, such as clothing and other items found at the crime scene, hoping that new forensic techniques might reveal more about the true identity of the killer. But these requests faced significant resistance from the state, which was reluctant to reopen the case fully. The broader public, meanwhile, remained divided. Some saw Williams as a victim of a broken justice system, a man wrongfully convicted on the basis of unreliable testimony and insufficient physical evidence. Others viewed him as a dangerous criminal who had been justly sentenced for a heinous crime, one that had devastated Felicia Gale's family and left a lasting scar on the community. As legal proceedings dragged on, the case also began to attract international attention. It became part of a larger conversation about the use of the death penalty in the United States, especially in cases where doubt about guilt lingered. High-profile figures, including politicians, human rights organizations, and celebrities, voiced their concerns about Williams' situation. Some urged Missouri to commute his sentence, arguing that even the possibility of executing an innocent man was too great a risk to take. Others called for a complete abolition of the death penalty, using the Williams case as an example of how the system could fail. For Felicia Gale's family, the ongoing legal battles were a source of frustration and grief. They had endured years of court proceedings, appeals, and delays, all while seeking justice for the brutal murder of their loved one. The uncertainty surrounding Williams' fate left them in limbo, unable to fully move on from the tragedy that had upended their lives. The fate of Marcellus Williams now hangs in the balance. While the board appointed by Governor Greitens continues its review, Williams remains on death row, awaiting the outcome that could determine whether he will face execution, receive clemency, or be granted a new trial. The decision, when it comes, will not only shape Williams' future but also serve as a pivotal moment in the ongoing debate over justice and capital punishment in America. The story remains far from over, with many twists and turns still possible as new developments arise. The journey of Marcellus Williams, from his arrest to his conviction and now his fight for redemption, has captivated the nation, raising difficult questions about the role of evidence, witness reliability, and the weight of doubt in criminal convictions. His case has become emblematic of the challenges facing the justice system, especially when a life is on the line. As the years passed, the fate of Marcellus Williams hung in a delicate balance. The specially appointed board continued its review, combing through the case's complexities, and the new DNA evidence provided a glimmer of hope for Williams and his legal team. Yet, for every step toward potential exoneration, there were equal pushes from the state to uphold the original conviction, pointing to the testimonies that had sealed Williams' fate years before. In 2022, after exhaustive consideration, the board concluded that the DNA evidence raised enough questions about the integrity of the original trial. Their recommendation was to halt the execution permanently and seek a retrial, arguing that modern forensic science could not be ignored in a case where a man's life was at stake. For Williams and his advocates, this was a partial victory. While not fully exonerated, Williams was removed from death row, his life spared for the time being. The state, however, faced a difficult decision. Prosecutors had the option of either retrying Williams or dropping the charges altogether. Given the lack of new direct evidence tying Williams to the crime scene and the weakening of the original witness testimony over the years, the state's case had become more difficult to prove. After much deliberation, in 2023, the state decided not to pursue a new trial. Instead, they commuted Williams' sentence to life in prison without the possibility of parole, citing the doubt surrounding his guilt, but stopping short of a full exoneration. The decision brought some closure, though not complete resolution, to a case that had dragged on for more than 2 decades. Williams, while no longer facing the death penalty, remained incarcerated, his fight for full freedom continuing in the background. His supporters vowed to keep working on his behalf, hoping one day to clear his name entirely. For Felicia Gale's family, the final outcome left mixed feelings. While relieved that justice in some form had been served, the years of legal battles had taken a toll. The brutal loss of their loved one could never be fully healed by the courts. They, like many in the community, had to come to terms with the uncertainty that would forever surround the murder case. In the end, the journey of Marcellus Williams served as a profound reminder of the complexities of justice, how even in the face of doubt, the system can struggle to reconcile truth, fairness, and finality. His story will be remembered as one that raised vital questions about the death penalty, the reliability of evidence, and the fragile balance between guilt and innocence in the American legal system.